Welcome to the Chatty Auties Show, featuring candid conversations around faith, church, culture, and neurodivergence. I am your host, Rebekah Josann, and this is my co-host, William O'Flaherty, the author of the Screwtape Letters Handbook. This show is presented by Scripture Prescriptions Ministries, a faith-based resource for spiritual growth, development, and health of the mind, body, and spirit. I am also the founder of Autism and Disability Advocacy Services, or ADAS, as a dual-certified, trauma-informed professional mental health coach and professional life coach through Light University, which is associated with the American Association of Christian Counselors, or AACC. How would you respond to the statement, "Everyone is a little autistic"? Is that a helpful or hurtful way to think about autism? What characteristics come to mind when you think of an autistic person? These and related issues will be explored in this episode. Don't forget, we've done 4 previous shows. The last 2 episodes dealt with artificial intelligence and how it can be harmful, as well as ways it can be used for good. If you missed those or the first 2 episodes, you can find them on this channel and YouTube, as well as other streaming platforms. But before we get to today's episode, here is your scripture prescription to write on your heart to help you set your mind with intention. This scripture comes from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 14. And we urge you, brothers, to admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, and be patient with everyone. William, we have quite the episode today, and I'm going to turn this over to you. I know you're going to be leading this one because you have some really interesting stuff to share with us. Go for it.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. So back at the end of April 2025, if you're watching this the first year, I posted on my YouTube channel, Adult Autism with William, an 8-minute video entitled True or False, Everyone is a Little Autistic, where I attempted to settle the issue once and for all. It's now solved. That's why it's not solved. But anyway, the approach I took was to use examples of characteristics typically associated with with an autistic person. That someone may say, "Oh, well, that person's autistic," or "Everyone's a little autistic because of this or that individual characteristic." And so I thought that would be fun to adapt that for here. So before we begin here, I want to draw a parallel that I did on that video. Again, it's only 8 minutes, so if you want a short version or if you want a nice summary, then after you finish watching this, you can go catch that. But a parallel between blindness and autism. That is, would it be fair to say everyone is a little blind? What do you think, Rebekah?
Well, I think this is a great comparison because it's true. Someone can have varying levels of blindness, as you're going to be explaining. And with any disability, we need to keep this in mind, right? Mm-hmm. Because what we're doing is we're unintentionally downplaying someone's disability when we say something like this. And I know you're going to go into this explanation of blindness and how this fits. So go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Well, a person who is blind likely does have some degree of sight. It is not accurate to say that everyone is a little blind just because their vision is not 20/20. Now, some of my experiences from my first wife, she was legally blind, but she could still see. And so many individuals would not characterize. But of course, that gets into not having a obvious signs for a certain condition and such. But anyway, I did learn that the term legally blind refers to a specific level of visual impairment, and that a person is considered legally blind if the following two characteristics. Their vision is 2200 or less in their better eye, even with correction. In other words, glasses or contacts. And I actually vaguely remember back in high school, someone said that, I don't know, let's see how this fits here. My dyslexia is coming in, but without their glasses, their vision was greater than 2200. But anyway, even with correction, it has to be so. But also their visual field, which is 20 degrees or less in their better seeing eye, which I'm not too familiar about what that all means per se, other than I guess it's, the degree of range there. But either which way, the point is that even though this is not a perfect illustration, there is a legal definition in terms of whether a person is blind or not. And so there is a specific diagnosis that individuals can get. And there are some valid self-assessments, which we'll note about here in a second. But yeah, so we're going to consider the DSM-5 TR criteria for adult autism, and no one should determine based on what we're sharing today whether they are autistic or not. You need to go to a qualifying professional to find out if they are. But having said that, not everyone is able to or might be able to afford getting an evaluation. So, Rebekah, what has been your experience in this realm personally and or with those you've interacted with?
Yeah, that's great. So here's what I run into, and I hear this with a lot of other autistic people, is that the test itself is extremely expensive. And I think we mentioned that in the first episode, that people just simply cannot afford to get tested for this autism. So a lot of people are going and turning to other communities to see what types of traits that we identify with, right? Because I think I've also mentioned this at some point, and I say it all the time. It's not necessarily the diagnosis as much as the experience that you're experiencing, right? Because you could have traits very similar to autism, but it could be something else. Yet you still need support. You still need to be valued and seen as somebody who's struggling. And I think even in my situation with chronic PTSD, and having to navigate that, but also recognize that I have a lot of neurodivergent traits. And I guess now, because again, we talked about this in I think episode 2 or 3 about how Asperger's turned to autism spectrum disorder with levels. I would have been probably like a level 1 if I was actually officially diagnosed. So many people are choosing self-diagnosis based on their experiences. And I think that that's just as valid. I really do. Because regardless of what the medical professional field may say, there is a need to listen to the person, right, that is going to them, right? Listen to them, listen to their experiences, listen to the struggles that they're having and their experiences with autistic traits. Because even if you may not say this person is diagnosed autistic, right, they may be experiencing things that are enough to fit in with the autistic community. And I think that's important to note.
Very good points. Now, a common trait in terms of what is associated with autistic individuals is to have some degree of social challenges. However, just because a person is socially awkward or maybe even overly friendly, this doesn't mean that they are automatically on the spectrum, which of course is another term used to say that someone is autistic. So then social differences or difficulties is the first of 2 major criteria that an individual must have to possibly be diagnosed autistic. In fact, in the social differences category, there are actually 3 subsections that must be true as part of a qualifying diagnosis of autism. Now, unfortunately, the wording in the official language is more negative. That is, it uses deficits instead of differences. That's another topic altogether. But for now, I want to acknowledge that and note that I will sometimes use the more negative language, even though I believe it is better to use a more neutral wording for that. Rebekah, what have you heard from others about this, the use of negative terminology used to describe autistic characteristics?
The wording and the way that people will say, oh, that person isn't using eye contact, that person, has seems to be a little socially awkward, right? When we're pointing those facts out, all right, they may be facts, but when we're pointing them out in that way, it can be very personally hurtful, right? It can be discouraging for someone to hear it. It's not like we walk around going, "Oh, that person wears funny hats." Haha.
Oh,
I like your hat. I think your hat's wonderful. But like if someone had that thought, right? And they said, "Oh, I don't like that hat. That's funny looking." Well, to just come out and say it like that, it doesn't help connect with the autistic community, right? And when to say something like what we're talking about, well, everyone's a little autistic, right? It's a downplaying of that person's characteristics and their traits and the way that God made them special, right?
hmm Well, so then, as mentioned, there are three subcategories, and this is from the DSM-5-TR, and they are that a person has, and I'm going to use the more negative language this time, deficits in 1, social emotional reciprocity, 2, nonverbal communicative behaviors, and then 3, developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. So again, a person must have differences or difficulties let's see, difficulties or differences, deficits is in the official language in each of these three areas to meet the first of two major criteria for an autism diagnosis. Thus, just because a person doesn't make eye contact or lacks facial expression, as just a couple of examples from this second category, this doesn't mean a person is a little autistic. It merely means that they have characteristics that are part of the criteria to be diagnosed autistic. Then if you know someone, and who doesn't, who is always interrupting conversation and doesn't seem to get the back and forth nature of conversation, this doesn't mean automatically that person is autistic. This individual merely has one characteristic from the first major category that would be considered consistent with a person diagnosed as autistic. Then in the third category, a person isn't automatically or isn't a little autistic if they have trouble making friends or maintaining friendships. Unless, of course, they have that difficulty and they also meet the other two criteria in addition to ones that we haven't yet mentioned.
This is really helpful because you're speaking also as a family counselor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you met a lot of autistic people in your practice?
Well, it wasn't a population that we commonly work with because in terms of we would see, or that is the what we're not going to get into in a major way is those that need more supports level 2 or 3 would need other services. And so, right. But in the last 3 years, definitely, we've had more families that have kids that are diagnosed autistic.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things I want to make a point of is it's easy to see level 2s and 3s. It's easier, I should say, to see levels 2 and 3 in someone visually. But that level 1, that Asperger's side, that is a lot harder to identify, right? And I think that's where we get a lot more of the everybody is a little autistic because people may recognize traits in an autistic level 1 person. And then they might identify with some of those traits. Like you said, they could have 1 or 2 and be like, oh, well, I do that. I do that too. So then I must have a little autism in me too. Not necessarily like what you're pointing out here. Trouble making friends, maintaining friendships, things like that can also be just your social upbringing. There's a lot of people who have come from sheltered places. I grew up in a very sheltered home. Some of my social interactions were from that, but something I noticed that was different with me in my personal story is I isolated a lot. I spent a lot more time alone because I had a hard time understanding what people were talking to me about. And that was the hardest part because I thought I understood, but they did not. And I always felt like I was in this other world, on this other planet. And I used to say, I think I'm from another planet before I knew Jesus. I thought I came and was, crash landed here somehow. And many autistic people have that experience, right? So the difference, I think, with me was I didn't pick up on the social cues except for in masking. I was imitating, copying what other people were doing. So then when I was out on my own having to figure out friendships and relationships, I was always the weird, awkward one. Immediately I became the awkward one. Well, because I had a hard time with social cues and social anything. So people just got to know me that way.
Mm-hmm.
But
oh yeah, I can definitely relate. Now, in a moment, we're going to go into the next major criteria, which is restrictive or repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, or activities. But before we continue, we're going to pause for this announcement.
So I'm certain you've noticed by now that our world is very different than you remember. Anxiety and stress are spiking. Maybe you're feeling uncertain about your future and direction. You're horrified by what is happening in our world and wondering why God would allow so much destruction. Your relationship with God may be weakened and has lost its vibrancy as a result, and your trust meter is depleting. Many of us were taught who God is from the church pulpits, only to experience devastating and shocking sides of Him we cannot explain. We believe myths over truth, get our biblical understanding backward, and have followed teachings that led us astray. Know that you're not alone. One of the ways God led me into being a part of a healing space for those of you feeling this way is through a life coaching calling. As a life coach, I've had the honor and privilege to care for many souls, reviving and rejuvenating spirits that are discouraged and disappointed, reintroducing the diminishing concepts of joy and hope in our salvation and life existence, facilitating a renewed sense of purpose. Throughout a biblically rich and foundational coaching experience paired with practical strategies and actionable steps, my coaching style helps you regain the clarity you're looking for in life, the perspective shifts of your mindsets to see things from God's perspective over your own, tainted by trauma and the world's messages. Together, we untangle the knots, sort through the messy, and pick up the pieces to build something beautiful and essential. For coaching effectiveness, you must want it, see the need, and desire the transformation. Does this sound like you? You can go to my website at www.RebekahJosann.com, click the coaching link, and explore the type of coaching I offer. I often work with those on the autism and neurodivergent spectrum and their caregivers, but am not exclusive to only these people groups. I will work with anyone who is in need and ready to invest in your future aligned with God's plans and purpose for you. Contact me today through my coaching interest form on my website or visit me at Facebook under Rebekah Josann and send me a message. I look forward to connecting with you. And now, William, it's time for
Down the Rabbit Hole,
where we take 5 minutes to talk about whatever pops in our head at random and challenge you to connect the dots, because in our heads, it makes perfectly good sense. So this is a funny one that I saw and I had to share it. Apparently, it is so hot in Iowa
How
that the
hot is it?
the cornfields have turned to popcorn.
Oh, no.
So here's an image of what I saw on Facebook. This was a funny AI news story, but it caught my attention, and I actually caught myself believing it until I realized it was AI. I was like, wait, can that even happen? And I probably shouldn't have thought that, but, that's where my brain goes. So popcorn, talking about popcorn, speaking of popcorn, what is your favorite popcorn?
Well, I have not been a real connoisseur of popcorn, but about 5 or so years ago, I remember somebody having popcorn that had the chocolate, laced or whatever one might say and whatnot.
Yummy.
So, I guess one of the characteristics for autistic people is they go for the same food. So I hadn't really ventured into all the different varieties. And so, but yeah, that one would be something that I would go for. But I mentioned to you when we were brainstorming some different stuff that, ironically, even though in college at one time early on I was a nutrition major. Later in life, about 20 or so years ago, I remember thinking, okay, here I need to lose some weight here. Let's see. Popcorn doesn't have any calories, so I'm just going to go ahead and have some popcorn here for dinner or whatever. And then, of course, later I looked and go, oh, no, it's not a calorie-free food, is it?
Oh, man, that probably just popped the bubble for so many thinking, oh, man, I thought I thought popcorn was good. So is it really damaging, or is it just you still have to be careful?
Yeah, I mean, with anything, it's not very damaging per se, unless that was what you ate all the time. But of course, getting into all the, extra stuff like with the chocolate one, when you're gonna, eat more of it, then, and of course your caramel one, definitely, you have to limit it, but having it from time to time is not all that bad.
Okay. Well, that's good news for everybody out there who just was like, oh, man, I thought I could have popcorn as a snack, calorie-free snack. So my family, I have a fond memory. A lot of times those tins that have like the three sections, that used to be like a gift. I can't remember who gave it to us, but some family member used to give it to us every Christmas. And it was like the thing we looked forward to. It had caramel popcorn, it had the cheese popcorn in there, and then of course the classic butter. But I've always been fond of the popcorn like shakers that have the seasonings in them.
Okay.
They have different ones that you can actually sprinkle on your popcorn. You should try that sometime, William.
Oh,
I think
okay.
you will love it. It does. It has like these different types of seasonings, and they make the popcorn pop.
Oh,
That was a
okay.
joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the other thing. Jokes. Oh my goodness. Jokes and autistic people. I have heard some jokes that I'm like, I do not get, and everybody else is laughing. Has that ever happened to you?
I kind of it's so automatic that I will kind of be quick at sensing. And so if someone, and then it probably comes across definitely as more artificial. So I won't necessarily get it, but then I'll go ahead and act like I do. So now the cat's out of the bag.
William's telling secrets.
People who, to tell a joke there are now forever going to wonder if I was sincerely laughing or just laughing because I knew it was supposed to be funny and I was humoring them.
I don't think there's anything wrong with having a little mystery in yourself, right?
Yes, that's right.
You never know. Oh, man. Well, speaking of mystery, have you ever been interested in like mystery novels or any kind of mystery stories? Like those early ones?
Yeah. I can get into some of that. I grew up the Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew mysteries. So that was good.
Yeah.
But mainly on TV. I didn't read it. But yeah, so mysteries are good. But it's no mystery. Our time is running out, and we're going to get back into our topic here. But yeah, so we were talking about the different criterion, and that the next major one is the restrictive or repetitive patterns of behaviors, interests, or activities. And there are actually 4 subcategories in this. However, a person only has to meet 2 of the 4 for an autism diagnosis. So that is in addition to meeting the other criteria that we previously mentioned. Now, and so if you consider this, that's why there's an expression that I forget who actually said it, but it basically says that when you've met one person who's autistic, you've only met one person. Or I could creatively maybe say it slightly different, that no 2 autistic people are alike, which I'm sure other people have said. But anyway, again, in the official language, this is described as restrictive, repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, or activities. And then the text notes that it must be manifest by at least 2 of the following, which is what we were just saying. So again, it's 2 of the following. So the first subcategory is stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech. Now, one example could be lining things up. For children, it might be toys. For adults, it might be action figures. Now, I know what you're thinking, Rebekah, and the rest of the audience. Like, aren't action figures the same things as toys? Well, that is a rabbit hole for a future story. So for the sake of time, we're going to kind of bypass that conversation.
Okay, sounds good.
So, people can, though, leave their comments in the comments section about that. But my point is that a person who lines things up, it doesn't mean they're simply a little autistic. Now, it could be a sign to consider whether or not that person might be autistic, and they might need to be evaluated. But again, you have to meet several criteria to qualify for a diagnosis. Then the second subcategory is insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines, or ritualistic patterns, or verbal or nonverbal, or of verbal or nonverbal behavior. So if your uncle Steve or niece Alicia, and I don't have any relatives of those names, gets highly upset if you change their plans, or if they tend to eat the same food every day, then it doesn't mean automatically that, say it with me, that they're little autistic. So, yeah. So, well, have you come across a few people that don't like a change in routine or eat the same foods? I mean, we just did our popcorn one. When you're talking about like sprinkling different taste, or it's like, it's not sounding good. When I go to a buffet, I first eat as much as I want of the stuff I know I like, and then I'm full and I don't try anything new.
Well, that's an example of how different people can be on the spectrum. Some people would actually be loving trying all of them because that's an interest that they have, right? And then some people are like, no, I want it as simple as possible, as bland as possible, right? And I would say bland as in it doesn't have much flavor, like no seasoning, no nothing. I know people on both sides of the spectrum that have interests both directions. So I would say, like with this one, actually, can you ask that question again, because I just forgot it already.
Well, it was about food, and people
started thinking about popcorn.
To just eat the same food, but we probably could just move on from there. All right, well, so let's go ahead and continue by first recapping to remember that there are, again, 4 subcategories in this section. That I've already mentioned 2, and a person only has to meet 2 of the 4 for an autism diagnosis. That is, if they also meet the other qualifying criteria mentioned before, which you had to meet all 3 of those. So anyway, the subcategory number 3 is highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal or intense, abnormal in intensity or focus. So, common examples are the stereotypical fixation of trains or dinosaurs. That automatically means a person is autistic. But only having a very narrow or intense interest in something doesn't make a person autistic. Otherwise, everyone who had a specialized, job would be considered autistic, and that's definitely not the case. Then finally, the 4th subcategory is hyper or hyposensitivity to sensory input or unusual intensity or interest in sensory aspects of the environment. So this is obviously known as the sensory issues category. In fact, I've wrongly mentioned to other people that this was, if someone is autistic, that's going to be a telltale sign. But as we see here, that it is one of 4 in this category, and that they don't have to have an issue within this realm. But anyway, so a person with issues in this area, it could mean that they will be over or under reactive in the sensory realm, or they could be obsessively interested in certain smells or touching certain objects. That would lend itself to something similar to OCD. But again, these are just a few examples. And as before, just because someone has problems or is different in this area, it doesn't automatically mean that the individual is autistic or that they're a little autistic, which we're saying is not helpful. But, actually to sum up, again, for this is someone needs to have differences or deficits in all 3 of the first major criterion, which we talked about, I referenced it a moment ago, and then just 2 of the four that we just discussed.
Well, this is really helpful, even to me. Probably some of the best explanation and of all of this. And honestly, I would encourage you to, because this is such a heavy topic and it had a lot of information, play it back, rewind it, rewatch it, re-listen to it, and take notes, because this is something so valuable that you're sharing, William. For all of the people out there who may have had other reasons why they're having autistic traits, right? It could be environment, it could be the food that we're eating, the toxins that are going into our body that shouldn't be there. I mean, there's so many reasons why someone might be struggling in some area. And there's a word too that I will not mention, because if I do, I could get striked from YouTube on a reason why. But yeah, so it's something that I think it's so important to gather information. We are not coming here saying that this is exactly every single thing we say is what you should follow, but for yourself, do your research. We always, encourage that too. Do your own research, check into these things, look it up, look at what other professionals are saying in this area of how they're diagnosing autism, because we don't want to diagnose ourselves with something that we actually don't have. This is why I say that when someone asks me, "Are you autistic?" I say, well, when things merged, when the Asperger's, which was, that high functioning side of things, merged with autism, well, obviously I'm not a level 2 or level 3, right? And you're not a level 2 or level 3. I can see that, right? So there's something about us that's a little different than your level 2 and level 3, more advanced autism. So what I like to answer is I say I have a lot of traits that are similar to the autism spectrum. I tend to claim more the neurodivergent side, which means that my brain is diverging and processing differently. And I can get behind that, partly because I am diagnosed with chronic PTSD. I have a lot of sensory struggles with certain areas. It can be a sound, it can be a social. My nervous system activates that way, right? And I'm a multi-creative. I mean, I'm multi-gifted in so many different areas, and that's a blessing, right? There's many of us in this community that can do so many different things, and while we get kind of pigeonholed into, well, just pick one, it is very difficult for us to do that naturally, right? So even just those traits alone helps me fall into that neurodivergent category. Could I get evaluated and be found to be autistic on that level 1? Possibly, right? Maybe one day I'll be able to, and then I'll have more answers. But if you aren't able to, don't beat yourself up, right? We really want you to know that you're loved and cared for just as you are, and you have those experiences, and they're valuable to us and to other people who are really paying attention to the autistic community in the professional field. And we encourage all professionals to really listen to this and take something from this, so that you can be even better for your clients. Was there anything else here that you wanted to give in conclusion?
Yes, yeah, I did want to wrap up by acknowledging, though, even though I was going through the DSM-5 TR, that there were actually 3 more criteria that I won't be mentioning now, because you can, look it up, and it's not all that lengthy, but in terms of processing it or understanding it, I remember before I was diagnosed that I looked at it and I misunderstood what it was actually saying without some elaboration. So in the actual criteria, it's brief and concise, but it can be not clearly understood. And so we're not going to go into that. And then any links that we're able to give, we can give you a link to be able to read that yourself. But because the main theme here is that everyone is not a little autistic. So we went about it by looking at the different characteristics and going through kind of all the different possibilities. So, and then even though we've already referenced level 1, level 2, and level 3, that in addition to when a person is diagnosed autistic, then there is that support needs is what's tended to spoken of now. And then this is accurate as of 2025. I don't know, we could say at any moment, but I think we'll have some warning or be aware of that, like when a DSM-6 is out. But they could change this and not have these different levels and come up with another term, because on our other show we talked about how using the term Asperger's is probably not the best because of the association. But if level ones want to have something to kind of be able to more easily be note in terms of what their support needs are, because it's different, that most people can think about a level 2 or 3 person as a stereotypical autistic. For clarification, then another term might be set out. But anyway, as of 2025, this is when this is accurate. And so I hope everyone has found that useful. As was noted, you might want to go back through this episode, or I did a 8-minute version of this with just me sharing about it that you might find helpful as well.
Awesome. Well, we thank you for watching and listening to this episode. You can find us at our websites, RebekahJosann.com, AdultAutismWithWilliam.com, and EssentialCSLewis.com. We also have, I do, me and my husband, not you, but my husband and I,
Not me.
not you, but me and my husband have an amazing ministry. It's a mobile RV ministry called R&R Road Warriors, with the R and ampersand. That's the ampersand sign, R. You can find us on Facebook. We have an amazing ministry to people who have left the church, who have not ever stepped foot in a church, and God is using us in amazing ways. So you can check that out and connect with us on our email list. You can also find us at Instagram at the Chatty Auties Show. There's going to be a screen with all of these at the very end of this episode and in the show notes if you're listening on a different platform. To join our email list for the Chatty Auties Show, you will also find a link in the show notes. And if you are watching this on QVision TV network, you can hover over the QR code with your camera to connect with us and receive emails for when these episodes drop. We are so grateful to have you listening. And please check out our other episodes that we've already filmed. I think you'll enjoy those very much. And we're kind of putting together some puzzle pieces, puzzle pieces for the autistic community and those who are looking in on us and trying to understand us, because we are a valuable part of society, valuable part of the church, and we want to get that message out to the world. So we thank you for being here, and we will see you next time.